But maybe some of you haven't been on my blog and aren't familiar with my writing, and so don't know what you'll be missing if you don't get this huge book. It's possible. So, I thought I would read you a bit. This is just the last 2 pages of the second book, which was called Fish Custard. It's written just after the first Matt Smith season finished, and I suppose it's me trying to sort of sum up my feelings about Doctor Who, and therefore I end up talking about Bob Dylan and Wagner and Bristol. Lots of things have got nothing to do with Doctor Who, but I guess that's how I write. I went for another walk along the river. I listened to my iPod. I realised that Visions of Joanna is the best 6 minutes of anything ever recorded by anyone, ever. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the lyrics of Visions of Joanna contain everything there is to be known. I used to think it was the opening bars of Parsifal, but now I'm pretty sure it's Visions of Joanna. And while I was walking and listening, I saw what it was that I've been trying and failing to say about Doctor Who for the past 3 months. Years ago, after Sylvester but before Paul, I read a fanzine article about growing up as a Doctor Who fan in the 1970s. Most of the people in the Doctor Who Appreciation Society were still writing about growing up as a Doctor Who fan in the 1960s. This one was written by someone of my own age. The writer of the article told a lot of embarrassing stories against himself, about stealing another boy's underwear during a swimming lesson because he desperately needed some Doctor Who knickers for his collection, about working the Doctor's dialogue into his own conversation. His fellow pupils thought he was a bit of a nerd, and he got the cane when he tried out a choice Tom Baker one-liner on the headmaster. I forget if there was a point to the article. It would increase my confidence in the fundamental interconnectedness of all things if some reader could step forward and say, I was that soldier at this point. This reminded me of a lad in my class in the top juniors, year 6 in decimal money, who was a serious Doctor Who fan long before I was, and by serious I mean a fan of the books more than a fan of the series. He had a slightly posh accent, unlike me, and read real books about real science, and was on Isaac Asimov when I was still on Blast Off at Woomera. I remember being slightly perplexed that even after the one with the spiders, he continued to religiously watch Whodunit on ITV, and even wore a sort of frock coat arrangement to the end-of-term fancy dress party when everyone else was wearing scarves and hats that didn't fit. Whodunit was a game show in which celebrities watched a dramatised murder mystery, were allowed to interview the survivors in character, and then had to guess who the murderer was. Hosting it was John Pertwee's job, in between the police box and the scarecrow. Watching ITV at all was pretty daring in those days. But of course, it made perfect sense. My friend wasn't a Doctor Who fan, he was a Third Doctor fan, a John Pertwee fan. He liked to spend hours pottering around with his chemistry set, just like Doctor Who liked to potter for endless hours in the TARDIS. To the extent that 11-year-olds have mannerisms, my friend patterned his mannerisms on John Pertwee. Fortunately for him, the Third Doctor was rather polite and courteous, and would never have said, "You're a classic example of the inverse relationship between the size of mouth and the size of brain," to the headmaster. Bob Dylan fans talk a lot of rubbish. There were 1960s interviews where people ask Bob what particular songs mean, and he says, I can't remember. The daftest are the Dylanologists, who think there's a consistent code behind the lyrics, that the one-eyed midget shouting the word now is the same character as the one-eyed undertaker who blew a futile horn, and that if only Bob could be persuaded to declare unto them this parable, they would thereby know all parables. I myself have been tempted to wonder if Joanna is marijuana. But anyone who thinks that a code book, a cipher, a turn to page 54 for the solution, could elucidate a line like, see the primitive wallflower freeze while the jelly-faced women all sneeze, and the one with the moustache says, geez, I can't find my knees, will never know what that poem, or any poem, means, because they don't understand what poetry is. And so that's what I've been trying, and failing, to say about Doctor Who. Comic readers might remember when John Byrne was about 12 months into his run on the Fantastic Four, after he'd worked out what he was doing, but before he got to up himself. About the time he did that issue that was half Galactus and half Doctor Doom, in which the FF themselves didn't appear. You've been reading the Fantastic Four for years because it sort of reminded you of the Fantastic Four, and suddenly this new guy was writing it, drawing it, and you weren't so much reading it as swimming in it. That's what I've been trying to say about Doctor Who. The 10th Doctor was dramatic and moody and funny, particularly when he went off on one. And the 9th Doctor was like a tough working man with Doctor Who hidden inside him. And the 7th Doctor was like a jester who was carrying the whole universe on his shoulders, and the 6th Doctor was scary and nasty and mad and fascinating, and the 5th Doctor was played by Peter Davison. And I like watching all of them, even Peter. And that's what's different. Since 1981, there have been a long succession of Doctors who I've really, really liked to watch. Matt Smith is the first Doctor since Tom Baker who I've wanted to be.